Let me start with a question so simple it sounds almost silly. How many ancestors do you have? Go ahead, think about it. 2 parents? 4 grandparents? 8 great-grandparents? You're just doubling each time, right? A clean geometric progression. So go back 10 generations, call it 300 years, and you've got somewhere north of 1,000 ancestors. Fine. Keep going. 20 generations, maybe 500 years back, and now you need over 1 million people to account for your existence. Still sounds plausible. But here's where things start going sideways. Push back 30 generations, call it 750 years, and the math demands more than 1 billion ancestors. 1 billion. Except the entire human population in the year 1200 was somewhere between 3 and 400 million. So either arithmetic is broken or something absolutely peculiar is going on. And that peculiar something is exactly what I want to talk to you about tonight. Because the real answer to the question, where did I come from, turns out to be one of the most beautiful, strange, and deeply connected things you will ever encounter. By the time we're done, you'll see that your family tree is no tree at all. It's more like a net, a tangled, interconnected web that joins you to every person in this room, to kings and to beggars, to hunters and to farmers, and ultimately to the very atoms that were forged in the hearts of exploding stars billions of years ago. The idea of bloodline as a special thread connecting you to some unique origin, that's a story we tell ourselves. The reality is far more interesting. This is what I love about science. You start with something a child might ask, and if you follow it carefully, without flinching, it leads you somewhere profound. Where do I come from? Sounds like a question for a genealogist. But chase it long enough, and it becomes physics. Chase it even further, and it becomes philosophy. The walls between those disciplines are things we invented. Nature never built them. Let's start with something familiar. You know what happens when you pour cream into coffee? At first it sits there in a white blob, floating in black liquid, distinct, separate, yours. Wait 2 minutes. Come back. What do you see? It's gone. The cream spread out and mixed in, and the boundary vanished. You can't sort it back. You can't point to a molecule and say with confidence, that one came from the cream. It's all tangled together now. That's thermodynamics for you. And I'm not going to turn this into a lecture on entropy, but the principle is worth noticing. Things that seem separate have a way of merging over time. Family trees work exactly like this. Think of each ancestor as a little drop of cream falling into the vast coffee pot of human history. Go back far enough, and all those drops have dissolved into each other. The boundary between your family and mine stops meaning anything. There's just one great swirling cup. Now let me be precise about this, because precision is where the real surprise lives. You have 2 parents. Each of them had 2 parents, giving you 4 grandparents. Each generation you double the count. That's 2 raised to the power of n, where n is the number of generations. How many generations fit into 1,000 years? People have children at different ages, but a reasonable average puts a generation at somewhere between 25 and 30 years, so you get roughly 33 to 40 generations per millennium. Let's be conservative and use 30. 2 to the 30th power is approximately 1 billion. A billion ancestors just to produce you. But as I said, the total human population in the 1200s was maybe 3 to 400 million. The numbers don't add up. Even if your ancestors came from every inhabited continent, you still can't squeeze 1 billion unique people out of a world that didn't have 1 billion people. The resolution to this apparent paradox has a name: pedigree collapse. And it is one of the most beautiful facts in all of mathematics as applied to human life. See, a genuine tree branches outward and each branch stays separate. Human genealogy doesn't work that way. The branches curve back and run into each other. Your great-great-great-great-grandmother on your mother's side might be the very same person as your great-great-great-great-grandmother on your father's side. The same individual occupies multiple positions in what you thought was a branching tree. And this isn't some exotic rarity. It's mathematically unavoidable. Think about why. Throughout most of human history, people married who was nearby, the same village, the same valley, the same river basin. Before railways and automobiles and airplanes, most people spent their entire lives within a few miles of where they were born. They married their neighbors. And in a village of a few hundred souls, your neighbors were already your cousins. Maybe distant, but cousins nonetheless. An anthropologist named Robin Fox estimated that around 80% of all marriages in human history were between second cousins or closer. Not because people were peculiar, but because those were the available options. Imagine a young woman in a village of 200 people. How many eligible men does she have to choose from? Maybe 30 or 40 of appropriate age and availability. Of those, half are likely her first or second cousins. The fellow from the next village over, the stranger, he's her third cousin. Everyone is already related. Repeat this across thousands of villages over thousands of years, and the family tree doesn't just collapse. It has to collapse. It's not an aberration. It's the structure of human society for most of our existence. So instead of 1 billion distinct ancestors in the year 1200, you actually had perhaps a few thousand unique individuals, each one showing up hundreds or thousands of times across the different branches of your genealogy. And here's where it gets really remarkable. A mathematician named Kenneth Wachter calculated that every English person alive in 1066, every single one who left any descendants at all, is an ancestor of every English person alive today. I want to make sure that lands properly, so let me restate it. If someone living in England during the Norman conquest has even one living descendant anywhere, that person is in everyone's family tree. Not most people's trees, everyone's. This isn't mysticism, it's combinatorics. A statistician at Yale named Joseph Chang took this further and built rigorous mathematical models accounting for geography, migration patterns, and all the messiness of real human populations. What he discovered was a concept he called the identical ancestors point. Here's what it means. If you go back far enough in time, every person who was alive at that moment falls into exactly one of two categories. Either they have no living descendants whatsoever, their line ended, perhaps they died young, perhaps all their descendants eventually died out, or they are an ancestor of every single human being alive today. There is no third option. No one is an ancestor of some people, but not others. If your lineage survived at all, it spread until it touched everyone. Chang estimated that for humanity as a whole, this point occurred roughly 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built about 4,500 years ago. By Chang's reckoning, every person alive when those limestone blocks were being hauled into position, every person who left any descendants, is your ancestor, and mine, and everyone else's. The pharaohs, the slaves, the engineers, the farmers who grew grain along the Nile. If they have any living descendants, they're in your family tree. For Europeans specifically, Chang's calculations suggest something even more startling. The most recent common ancestor of all living Europeans probably walked the earth around 1400 CE. That's the Renaissance. That's more recent than Columbus reaching the Americas. Every European alive today, regardless of which country, regardless of what their family traditions say, descends from the same individual who lived fewer than 700 years ago. Not probably, not most likely. Mathematically certain, given how populations mix. And looking forward, within roughly 2,000 years, everyone on Earth will likely be descended from nearly everyone alive today who leaves any descendants at all. Your distant descendants will be related to the descendants of everyone in this room who has children. Now you might raise an objection here, and it's a good one. You might say, look, I have blue eyes and my friend has brown eyes. We look different. We trace our recent heritage to different parts of the world. How can we possibly share the same ancestors? And this is where we need to carefully separate two different ideas: genealogical ancestry and genetic ancestry. They're not the same thing, and mixing them up causes enormous confusion. Here's how DNA inheritance actually works. When your parents made you, each gave you half their DNA, 23 chromosomes from your mother, 23 from your father. But when you pass DNA to your own children, those chromosomes don't go along intact. They get shuffled. They break apart and segments recombine, your mother's pieces mixing with your father's pieces into new hybrid arrangements. Your child doesn't receive a clean copy of your maternal chromosomes. They get a reshuffled mosaic. Let me give you an image. Imagine your chromosomes as two decks of playing cards, one deck from your mother, one from your father. When you have a child, you don't hand over one deck intact. You riffle the two decks together, and your child gets the resulting shuffle, with cards from both decks in some mixed-up order. Now imagine this shuffling happening every generation, over and over. After enough rounds, the original decks are hopelessly intermixed. Cards from great-grandpa's deck might be anywhere or nowhere. They might have been lost in the shuffle entirely. Go back 6 or 7 generations to your great-great-great-grandparents. In theory, you have 64 of them. But here's the thing. Some of them may have contributed 0 DNA to you, not a single base pair. They're your genealogical ancestors, connected to you through an unbroken chain of parent-child relationships. But they are not your genetic ancestors, because the particular DNA segments they carried happened to get shuffled out before reaching you. Geneticists have confirmed this is not just possible. It's common. Beyond about 5 or 6 generations, it's essentially guaranteed that some of your ancestors left no genetic trace in you whatsoever. If you go back 450 years, you have over 32,000 genealogical ancestors, but your DNA contains contributions from only around 1,000 of them. The other 31,000 are connected to you by lineage, but invisible to any genetic test. By your 8th generation of ancestors, there's a good chance that many of those individuals contributed nothing to your genome at all. So here's the strange situation this creates. Everyone who was alive 5,000 years ago and left any descendants is your genealogical ancestor, but most of them are not your genetic ancestors. Their DNA got shuffled out somewhere along the way. You're descended, in the lineage sense, from millions of people, but your actual genome carries material from only a few thousand. This should give pause to anyone who takes a DNA ancestry test and draws confident conclusions about who they are. Your genetic results are a partial snapshot of a much larger and more complex story. The people whose DNA didn't make it through the shuffling were just as real, just as much a part of the chain of events that led to your existence. They lived lives that shaped the world your genetic ancestors inhabited. Ancestry is much bigger than genetics can capture. But now I want to go even deeper. Let's ask a more fundamental question. What is an ancestor physically? What is the actual material substance that connects you to someone who lived 1,000 years ago? Let's think about atoms. Here's a fact that tends to unsettle people when they first encounter it. Most of the atoms in your body right now were not in your body 7 years ago. Your body is continuously absorbing atoms from food, water, and air, and releasing atoms back into the environment. You are not a fixed object. You're more like a pattern, a whirlpool in a flowing river, where the shape persists even though the water is always moving through. So what does it mean, at this atomic level, to be made of your ancestors? Well, some of the atoms that were in your ancestors' bodies, when they breathed, when they ate, when they eventually died and their physical substance returned to the earth, some tiny fraction of those atoms found their way, through countless intermediate steps, into you. But here's the thing, if that's the connection, then you're not just connected to your genetic relatives. You're connected to every human being who ever lived. Carbon atoms don't care about genealogy. They cycle through the biosphere, from plants to animals to soil to atmosphere and back again, impartially, without regard for family relationships. A physicist once worked out that every single breath you take almost certainly contains at least one molecule that was exhaled by Julius Caesar. Think about that. The mixing of atoms through the atmosphere over 2,000 years is so thorough that Caesar's molecules are statistically present in each lungful of air you draw in. So at the atomic level, the concept of ancestry becomes almost meaningless. We're all assembled from the same recycled material. But let me push further still. Where did those atoms come from in the first place? This is the most beautiful part of the story, and it happens to be completely true. In the beginning, there was essentially just hydrogen, the simplest element, one proton, one electron. That's almost all the Big Bang produced, some helium, a trace of lithium. But if you want to build a person, hydrogen alone won't do it. You can't make bones from hydrogen. You can't make DNA. You can't make a brain. For that, you need carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and calcium and iron. So where did those heavier elements come from? Stars made them. Deep inside stars, under temperatures of millions of degrees, hydrogen nuclei get squeezed together and fuse into helium. That's the engine that makes stars shine. But eventually the hydrogen runs low, and something wonderful happens. The The core contracts, heats up further, and helium starts fusing. 3 helium nuclei stick together to produce 1 carbon nucleus, a process called the triple alpha process. It's a remarkable coincidence of nuclear physics that the energy levels involved make this possible at all. If they were slightly different, carbon would be unstable, and we wouldn't exist to have this conversation. From carbon, the star builds oxygen, then neon, then silicon. The interior of a massive star starts to resemble an onion. Layers of different elements, each layer hotter than the one above, each fusing different things. But there's a limit. Fusion releases energy all the way up to iron. Beyond iron, you have to put energy in to fuse nuclei together, so the star runs out of tricks. For a massive star, what happens next is spectacular. The core collapses in less than a second. The innermost material falls inward at roughly a quarter the speed of light. The outer layers come crashing down and then bounce. The whole thing explodes, a supernova. For a few weeks, that one dying star outshines an entire galaxy of hundreds of billions of other stars. And in that titanic explosion, elements heavier than iron get forged. Gold, silver, uranium, iodine, the ingredients of planets and people. Some of these heavy elements may even come from something more violent still. When 2 neutron stars, the collapsed cores of dead massive stars, spiral inward and collide, the resulting kilonova forges gold and platinum in quantities beyond imagination. The gold in a wedding ring might have been created when 2 neutron stars merged somewhere in our galaxy billions of years ago. Those atoms traveled through space, got swept up in the cloud that formed our solar system, sank into the forming Earth, were eventually mined, smelted, shaped, and slipped onto someone's finger. Every atom has a story like that. All the material scattered by stellar explosions drifts through the galaxy as clouds of gas and dust, enriched with carbon and oxygen and calcium and iron. Eventually, some of those clouds collapse under gravity and form new stars with planets. Our solar system formed from exactly such a cloud about 4.5 billion years ago. The Earth condensed from debris orbiting the young sun, and the atoms in that debris, the very atoms that would eventually become you and me, were forged inside stars that lived and died before our sun was even born. The calcium in your bones was produced in a supernova. The iron in your blood, about 4 grams of it, not much but absolutely essential, was forged in the final hours of a massive star's life, in the silicon burning phase right before it exploded. The oxygen you're breathing this very moment was synthesized in stellar interiors billions of years ago. You are, in the most literal and non-metaphorical sense, made of star stuff. This is nuclear physics and stellar evolution and cosmic chemistry, not poetry. Let me give you the numbers because concrete numbers make this real. Your body is about 65% oxygen by mass, stellar fusion, about 18% carbon, stellar fusion, about 10% hydrogen. And here's the exception. That hydrogen is primordial. It dates to the Big Bang, making it roughly 14 billion years old. The hydrogen atoms in your body are the oldest things you own. Then there's about 3% nitrogen, 1% calcium, 1% phosphorus, all forged in stellar interiors. The iodine in your thyroid was probably synthesized when neutron stars collided somewhere in the galaxy. You are a walking assembly of stellar debris, and somehow, against all odds, that debris arranged itself into something that thinks, that wonders, that asks where it came from. Now I want you to try a thought experiment. Pick one atom of carbon, currently sitting in your fingernail. Let's trace it backward through time. Before your fingernail, it was in something you ate, say, an apple. Before the apple, it was in the apple tree. The tree pulled it from the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Before that, it was exhaled by some animal. Before that, it lived inside that animal's tissues, built from food, which came from plants. Go further back. The carbon cycles through the biosphere, through soil and ocean and atmosphere, passing through millions of organisms over millions of years. Trees, bacteria, fish, dinosaurs, all of them hosted this atom for a while. At some point in history, it may well have been inside a human being. An Egyptian scribe, a Roman legionary, a medieval baker, maybe several human beings in sequence. You can't trace the specific path, there's no way to follow individual atoms, but statistically, given how thoroughly atoms mix through the biosphere over geological time, The probability that atoms in your body have been in countless other bodies before is essentially certain. Go back further still. Before life existed, that carbon atom was in the Earth's crust, in volcanic gases, in the primordial seas. Before that, in the dust cloud that became our solar system. Before that, drifting through interstellar space, ejected from an exploding star. Follow it further. Inside that star, being assembled from lighter nuclei. Inside the gas cloud that formed that star. Back and back through generations of stars, all the way to the primordial hydrogen of the Big Bang. That one atom of carbon has been on a 14 billion year journey, and right now, it's in your fingernail. You could do this exercise for every atom in your body. Each one has its own epic story. Your body contains roughly 7 octillion atoms. That's a 7 followed by 27 zeros. Each one has a history reaching back to the beginning of time. Each one has passed through stars, through gas clouds, through countless living things. You are a temporary gathering of ancient travelers, a meeting point for atoms that have wandered across the cosmos for billions of years. The probability that they would all converge here, now in this precise arrangement called you, is so astronomically small as to be effectively zero. And yet, here you are. There's a principle in physics called conservation of matter. Matter is neither created nor destroyed, only rearranged. The atoms in your body are not freshly minted for you. They're borrowed. They've been used before, many times over. Scientists have traced radioactive isotopes through ecosystems and measured how long atoms spend in living tissue. The average carbon atom in your body cycles through in a matter of years. The phosphorus in your brain gets replaced roughly every couple of weeks. Different tissues turn over at different rates, but nothing stays permanently. You're more like a flame than a stone. The pattern persists while the material flows through. This means the material connection between you and your ancestors is not a figure of speech. When they died, the atoms in their bodies dispersed into soil and water and air. Some fraction of those atoms, cycling through the biosphere, eventually wound up in you. But by the same logic, you're materially connected to every human being who has ever lived. Cleopatra, Genghis Khan, the cave painters at Lascaux, people who died last year. Scientists have actually done the calculations. Given the number of atoms in a human body and the rate at which atoms disperse through the environment after death, within a few centuries, those atoms spread so widely that they're present effectively everywhere in the biosphere. Every breath contains molecules that pass through Julius Caesar. Every glass of water holds molecules that once flowed through dinosaurs. The recycling is that complete. Ancestry in the physical sense is therefore universal. Everyone who ever lived is your ancestor in the atomic sense, and you will be an ancestor, atomically, to everyone who lives in the future, whether or not you have children, because your atoms will return to the common pool, and future lives will be built from them. Now let me circle back to something important, because I think it matters a great deal for how we understand ourselves and each other. There is a persistent and deeply wrong idea that ancestry is about purity, that there exist pure lineages, that some people descend from one group and others from another, that bloodlines can be traced back like rivers to separate unmixed sources. This is completely mathematically false. If you go back even a few thousand years, everyone alive today shares identical ancestors. Not similar ancestors, the same ancestors. The identical ancestors point makes this precise. Before that point in time, every person who lived and left any descendants is an ancestor of every person alive now. The concept of a pure lineage is therefore incoherent. Pure compared to what? At what moment in history do you draw the line? Every family has always been mixing with other families. That's what humans do. We move around. We meet strangers. We have children with them. The mixing never stopped. And thank goodness for it. Genetically, diversity is healthy. Populations that remain isolated and interbreed over generations accumulate genetic problems. The most famous illustration of this is European royalty, who practiced cousin marriage and niece marriage for generations in the belief that it preserved noble bloodlines. The Habsburgs are the textbook case. Charles II of Spain had a coefficient of inbreeding higher than the child of a brother and sister. He could barely chew his food. He was unable to produce children. His line ended with him. That is what pure bloodlines actually produce, not nobility, extinction. The mathematics of pedigree collapse tells us something important here. Your family tree doesn't just fold in on itself internally, it folds together with everyone else's family tree. Go back far enough and all our trees merge into a single web. There are no separate rivers flowing from distinct springs. There is one ocean of ancestry, and we're all in it. The differences we can observe, in appearance, in language, in cultural tradition, arise from more recent history. Which descendants inherited which genes, which populations migrated where, and interbred with whom. But these are surface features. Underneath, at a depth of only a few thousand years, there is a profound and inescapable unity, not as a moral aspiration, as a mathematical fact. Let me slow down and explain this the way I would to a bright 12-year-old, because if I can't make it that clear, I probably don't understand it as well as I think I do. Imagine drawing your family tree with yourself at the bottom. Your parents are on the line above you, their parents above them, and so on. As you go up, the tree gets wider. It's like an inverted triangle, expanding with each generation. But if you keep going back hundreds and then thousands of years, the triangle can't keep growing forever. There weren't enough people in the world to fill all those slots. So the lines have to start curving back toward each other, connecting branches that looked separate, merging what seemed to be distinct lineages. Your family tree isn't a tree, it's a net. Go back far enough, a few thousand years, and every living person's net is the same net. We're all woven into the same fabric. Now think about the atoms. Those are even more thoroughly connected. Every atom in your body has been part of other things before, other people, other animals, other stars. Atoms don't carry ownership tags. They get recycled endlessly. When anyone dies, their atoms return to the air, the water, the soil, and eventually become part of other living things, including you. So in a completely physical, non-metaphorical sense, you are made of the same material as everyone who came before you. Through family relationships and through the atoms themselves, you are connected to every person who ever lived. That's the haunting answer. Your bloodline doesn't lead to one special place. It leads to everyone and everything. Now, what does this actually mean for how we see ourselves? I think there's a genuine freedom available in really understanding this, a release from the peculiar burden of genetic identity. People search their genealogy for proof of nobility or interesting ancestry. They take DNA tests, hoping for confirmation of something essential about who they are. Am I really Irish? Am I descended from royalty? Do I have roots in one place or another? As if the answer would reveal something written into their nature. But the truth is, you came from everywhere. Your ancestry is the entire human story, with no exceptions. Nobody is pure. Nobody is specially separate. And I think this matters, because we live in an era when people are eager to draw lines, to invoke bloodlines and heritage and purity, as if genes respected national borders, as if atoms cared about cultural traditions. They don't. The material your body is made of has been wandering the universe for billions of years. It belongs to no nation, no race, no lineage. It belongs to the cosmos. And I don't say this to diminish individual identity. You are genuinely unique. The particular arrangement of genes that makes you who you are has never existed before and will never exist again. But your uniqueness doesn't come from possessing special materials. It comes from a particular arrangement of common materials. Think of a snowflake. Every snowflake is unique. The arrangement of ice crystals is different in each one, but they're all made of water. The uniqueness is in the pattern, not the substance. You are the same. Unique not because you're built from extraordinary stuff, but because the ordinary stuff of the cosmos can be arranged in inexhaustibly many ways. There's something liberating in recognizing that the atoms composing your body aren't really yours. You're borrowing them for a while. The universe loaned them to you, and you'll return them. This doesn't diminish the significance of your existence. If anything, it deepens it. Because in this brief window, those borrowed atoms have arranged themselves into something that can ask questions, feel wonder, experience confusion, marvel at its own improbability. Dead matter became alive. Matter became aware. We don't fully understand how that happened. Biology gives us some of the story. Chemistry gives us more. Physics provides the underlying rules. But the deep question, why is there experience at all? Why is there something it feels like to be here? remains genuinely mysterious, and yet it happened. On this small planet, orbiting an unremarkable star in an unremarkable region of an unremarkable galaxy, the universe built something that looks back at itself, thinks about itself, writes physics and poetry about itself, and asks where it came from. I once stood by the ocean watching waves roll in, and it struck me that those waves had been breaking on shores for billions of years before there were any eyes to see them. Water molecules, each one going about its own blind business according to simple physical laws, yet together forming patterns and rhythms and beauty, and then, somehow, life emerged. Complex molecules in the sea began copying themselves, making errors, evolving, growing more intricate over billions of years, until finally, here we stand on the shore, looking at the waves, wondering how we got here. Atoms with consciousness, matter with curiosity. That's what you are, and that's the answer to where your bloodline leads. To this moment, to you, made of ancient atoms, asking questions that no atom on its own could ever ask. Let me tell you about the other direction in time, because the mathematics of ancestry runs forward just as well as backward. If you go back several thousand years and find that every person alive then who left any descendants is now an ancestor of everyone alive today, you can flip that logic around. Several thousand years from now, every person alive today who leaves any descendants at all will be an ancestor of every person alive then. Your genes, if they make it into the future at all, will spread and spread until they're woven into the entire human population. The distinction between your family and mine will have dissolved just as completely as the distinction between us and those strangers who walked the earth a few thousand years ago. We come from a common past, and we're heading toward a common future. The branches converge as much as they diverge. And then there are the atoms. When you die, your atoms will disperse. They'll spread through soil and water and air. Within a few thousand years, atoms that are currently in your body will be present in billions of people, perhaps in everyone. I find something genuinely comforting in this. You as a conscious entity, as a being who knows itself, that will end. I won't pretend otherwise, but the matter that constitutes you won't vanish. It will transform, disperse, and become part of other things. You are not merely descended from the past. You will be an ancestor of the future. Your atoms will be inside bodies not yet born. Your influence, however small, will ripple forward through time. This is not personal immortality. Your awareness, whatever it actually is, will not persist. But the matter that presently constitutes you will continue, rearranged and repurposed, participating in the ongoing story of life on this planet. And in the longest view, even that story isn't the end. Billions of years from now, when the sun expands and the earth is consumed or scattered, the atoms that made us will return to interstellar space. They may become part of new worlds around new stars. The matter currently arranged as you and me may one day be arranged as something entirely different, something that also thinks and wonders and asks the same questions we're asking tonight. Where did we come from? How did we get here? Who are our ancestors? The answer will always be the same. We came from the universe. We are made of its substance. Our ancestors are the stars. This is where your bloodline actually leads. Not to a particular nation or ethnic group, not to a noble house or a peasant village, not to purity or to mixture. It leads to the cosmos, to the Big Bang and the first stars, to supernova and drifting gas clouds and the slow gravitational assembly of planets. You are the universe examining itself. The cosmos raising a question about the cosmos, matter that has briefly become conscious before returning to the unconscious depths it came from. And that, I think, is the most astonishing answer of all. Some people find this unsettling. They want their ancestry to be exclusive, to set them apart, to connect them to something special, kings, warriors, saints, a chosen line. But the real story is so much more exciting than that. You don't descend from one lineage. You descend from every lineage that survived, hunters and gatherers, farmers and nomads, conquerors and the conquered, from every corner of the globe. Your ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and famines. They crossed oceans and mountain ranges and deserts. They raised children under conditions we can barely imagine. Every one of them had to survive long enough to reproduce. All of that struggle, all that persistence, all that staggering, improbable luck, that's what stands between the beginning of life on Earth and you sitting here tonight. And then there are the atoms, The atoms in your body have been on a journey that makes any human migration look modest. They crossed light years of interstellar space. They survived the cores of dying stars at temperatures of millions of degrees. They were blasted outward in explosions that briefly outshone entire galaxies. You are the latest chapter of a story that began 14 billion years ago, and you get to be awake for it. You get to think about it, to be astonished by it. That seems like enough of a miracle to me. I don't need a royal lineage. So next time someone asks about your ancestry, your bloodline, your roots, remember what you learned tonight. You are made of material forged in stars. You share ancestors with every human being on this planet. Your atoms have been part of billions of other living things, and one day they'll be part of billions more. The divisions we construct between ourselves, the categories, the borders, the bloodlines, are human inventions. Useful sometimes, meaningful sometimes, but not fundamental, not written into nature. At the level of atoms, at the level of ancestry, at the level of the cosmos itself, we are one, not as a comforting story we tell each other, as a fact. Here's something to sit with. If every person who was alive a few thousand years ago and has any living descendants is necessarily an ancestor of every person alive today, what does that actually do to the idea of us and them? What does it mean for the lines we draw between peoples, nations, and identities? I'd really like to know what you think.